They were the ones we cheered for, the ones our kids wore jerseys for, the ones whose names echoed in packed stadiums on Sunday afternoons while millions watched from their living rooms. We built them up. We call them heroes. But what happens when the helmet comes off and the cameras stop rolling? What happens when the man behind the athlete reveals something the highlight reels could never show? A Super Bowl champion fleeing a crash scene he caused at nearly 120 miles per hour. A tight end whose girlfriend didn't just disappear, she was buried. A decorated safety who turned fame, charm, and pharmaceuticals into weapons against the most vulnerable. A former player who, from behind prison walls, tried to have a federal judge murdered. Tonight, we pulled back the curtain on some of the darkest chapters in NFL history. Stories of violence, betrayal, predation, and ruin. Men who had everything: talent, fame, fortune, and the adoration of millions, and chose paths that led not to championship rings or Hall of Fame inductions, but to prison cells, courtrooms, and shattered lives. These are the stories they hoped you'd forget. We are not going to let that happen. These aren't fictional villains. These are real men who wore real NFL uniforms. And what they did when the cameras stopped rolling will stay with you long after this video ends. If you're new to this channel, please take a second to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps us going. Now, let's get straight into the video. Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice, born April 22nd, 2000, emerged out of SMU and was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023 as a breakout wide receiver. By early 2024, he stood as a Super Bowl champion and a rising star in the NFL, a young man who seemed to have the entire football world at his feet. But on March 30th, 2024, a single night of reckless decision-making threatened to erase everything he had worked for. Rice was driving a leased Lamborghini Urus in Dallas, reportedly racing a Corvette at speeds around 119 miles per hour on North Central Expressway. In a series of aggressive and dangerous maneuvers, he collided into traffic and sparked a chain reaction crash involving 6 other vehicles. Multiple people were injured. After the impact, Rice and others from his car allegedly fled the scene on foot without checking on the other drivers, an act that compounded the severity of what had already been a catastrophic lapse in judgment. He was later charged with multiple offenses, including aggravated assault, collision involving serious bodily injury, and racing on a highway. Ultimately, under a plea deal, Rice pleaded guilty to 2 third-degree felony counts: collision causing serious bodily injury and racing on a highway causing bodily injury. Following his surrender and full cooperation with Dallas authorities, Rice took responsibility publicly and issued a statement expressing deep remorse, acknowledging a lot of sleepless nights and pledging to make the victims whole. In mid-July 2025, a Dallas County judge accepted his plea, ordering 30 days in jail to be served during a 5-year deferred probation period, along with restitution of approximately $115,000 in medical expenses. Civil lawsuits stemming from the crash are still pending, with payments over $1 million already settled in part. As part of the NFL's personal conduct review, Rashee Rice was suspended without pay for the first 6 games of the 2025 NFL season for violating the league's personal conduct policy. Chiefs coach Andy Reid has indicated that while Rice will participate in training camp, his regular season status remains uncertain pending disciplinary outcomes. A Super Bowl ring earned in triumph, now casting a long shadow over a career that is very much still being decided. Chad Wheeler. Chad Wheeler, born January 19th, 1994, rose from undrafted free agent out of USC to start 19 games in the NFL between 2017 and 2020, suiting up for the New York Giants and later the Seattle Seahawks. His imposing 6 feet 7 inches frame and college pedigree made him a hopeful talent until injuries and off-field issues began to shadow his promise. But nothing could have prepared those around him for what would emerge in the final days of January 2021. Wheeler was arrested in Kent, Washington, accused of violently assaulting his then-girlfriend, Aaliyah Taylor. Prosecutors say he demanded she bow to him. When she refused, he allegedly pinned her down, twice strangled her until she lost consciousness, and even pressed his hand over her mouth and nose while twisting her arm. Taylor woke a second time to Wheeler reportedly saying, "Oh, you're still alive." She sustained a fractured humerus, a dislocated elbow, and a concussion, injuries severe enough that she still wears a brace. Wheeler was charged with 3 felonies: first-degree domestic violence assault, second-degree domestic violence assault, and unlawful imprisonment, plus a misdemeanor resisting arrest charge. He pleaded not guilty and was released on $400,000 bail with an ankle monitor after initially being placed under psychiatric evaluation for bipolar disorder. His defense argued he was in a manic episode and off his medication. The victim declined to attribute motive solely to mental health. Her courage in coming forward and telling her story without flinching would ultimately prove decisive. By November 9, 2023, a King County jury returned verdicts of guilty on first- and second-degree domestic violence assault, while acquitting him of unlawful imprisonment. The jury found that Wheeler used force or means likely to result in death, allowing for a mandatory minimum 5-year sentence on the first-degree count. On March 1, 2024, he was sentenced to 81 months in prison, nearly 7 years, plus 36 months probation, ordered to undergo mental health evaluation, pay restitution, and have no contact whatsoever with the victim. His sentencing began immediately. His career, effectively, was already long over. Kevin Ware Jr. Kevin Ware Jr. once stood tall as an NFL tight end, suiting up for teams like the San Francisco 49ers and the Washington Commanders in the early 2000s. Though never a household name, his size, speed, and potential kept him in the league for several seasons. But what began as a promising athletic journey would veer into darkness, ending not in retirement, but in a courtroom, and with a sentence that would close the door on any remaining chapter of a normal life. In 2021, Kevin's name reemerged, not in a sports column, but in a missing persons report. His 29-year-old girlfriend, Taylor Pomaski, vanished after a house party in Spring, Texas. Witnesses described a violent argument between the two, but she was never seen alive again. Months passed, rumors swirled, and then, in December 2021, investigators made a grim discovery. Human remains buried in a shallow grave. DNA confirmed what many had feared. It was Pomaski. Kevin, already in custody on unrelated drug and gun charges, quickly became the focus of a murder investigation. Authorities accused him of brutally killing Pomaski and attempting to conceal the crime. The evidence was damning. In May 2025, Kevin Ware Jr. pleaded guilty to murder. The court sentenced him to 30 years for taking Taylor's life. An additional 15 years for the earlier federal drug and weapons convictions would run concurrently. Taylor Pomaski deserved more than to vanish from this earth without justice. At last, she has it. Kellen Winslow II. Kellen Winslow II once stood in the spotlight as one of the NFL's most promising tight ends. The son of Hall of Famer Kellen Winslow Sr., he carved out his own name with a standout college career at the University of Miami before being selected 6th overall in the 2004 NFL Draft. He earned a Pro Bowl selection in 2007 while playing for the Cleveland Browns and posted multiple 800-plus yard seasons. But beneath the stats and the accolades, a much darker story was quietly taking shape, one that would shock fans and devastate an untold number of victims. After retiring from football in 2013, Winslow's life spiraled out of control in ways that defied comprehension. Between 2018 and 2019, multiple women came forward with horrifying allegations. Winslow was accused of a disturbing string of sexual assaults targeting vulnerable women, some elderly, some homeless, some simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The charges ranged from rape to indecent exposure and lewd conduct. The incidents were not isolated, not accidental, not impulsive lapses. Prosecutors painted a portrait of a predator who roamed affluent neighborhoods in Southern California in deliberate search of victims, operating with chilling impunity. The investigation escalated rapidly as DNA evidence and witness testimony mounted. In 2019, Winslow was found guilty of rape, indecent exposure, and sexual battery in a partial verdict. Facing a retrial for the remaining charges, he ultimately accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt in multiple assaults. In 2021, a California judge sentenced him to 14 years in state prison. From NFL stardom to a prison cell, Kellen Winslow II's fall was complete. For the victims who suffered in the shadow of his fame, justice came late. But it came. Henry Ruggs III. Henry Ruggs III was once a rising star in the NFL. Drafted 12th overall in 2020 by the Las Vegas Raiders, the wide receiver was known for his blazing speed and big play potential. A product of the University of Alabama, Ruggs was part of the 2017 national championship team and quickly established himself as one of the league's most electrifying young talents. His future seemed limitless. And then, in the early hours of November 2nd, 2021, that future was obliterated, and so was someone else's. Around 3:40 in the morning, Ruggs was driving his Corvette at an astonishing 156 miles per hour down a Las Vegas residential street. Seconds later, his car slammed into the back of a Toyota RAV4, instantly igniting it in flames. Inside was 23-year-old Tina Tinter and her dog, both of whom were trapped and burned alive. Ruggs' blood alcohol level was later measured at 0.161, twice the legal limit. The speed, the alcohol, the dark of night on a residential road. It was a lethal and irreversible combination. He was arrested at the hospital shortly thereafter. In May 2023, following a lengthy legal process, Ruggs pleaded guilty to DUI, resulting in death and misdemeanor vehicular manslaughter. The court sentenced him to 3 years in prison, well below the maximum penalty of over 20 years, sparking widespread public outrage and an intense national debate about accountability, celebrity, and the value of a human life. For the family of Tina Tinter, no sentence could ever feel like enough. Robert McCune. Robert McCune once wore the armor of the NFL, an inside linebacker known for his power, grit, and tenacity. Born in Alabama and hardened by years in the military before stepping onto the gridiron, McCune's path to professional football was anything but conventional. After serving 6 years in the United States Army, including time station in South Korea and Kuwait, he played college ball at Louisville, then entered the NFL in 2005. Over the next several seasons, he suited up for teams like the Washington Redskins, Baltimore Ravens, and Miami Dolphins, earning a reputation as a disciplined, hard-hitting journeyman who defied the odds at every turn. But when the bright lights faded and the cheering stopped, McCune's next chapter would unfold not on a field, but in a federal courtroom. Between 2017 and 2018, McCune orchestrated a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting the Gene Upshaw NFL Player Health Reimbursement Account Plan, an initiative specifically designed to help former players cover costly medical expenses. Instead of using the system as intended, McCune led a ring of ex-players who submitted dozens of false claims for expensive medical equipment, including hyperbaric chambers and cryotherapy machines. In reality, none of the treatments were ever purchased, administered, or received. It was fraud, pure and calculated. Through this elaborate deception, McCune personally pocketed around $2.9 million. And he wasn't acting alone. At least 50 other former players were swept up in the conspiracy, with McCune functioning as the ringleader, the architect of a scheme that exploited a fund built to protect the very men he recruited to abuse it. Federal investigators from the Department of Justice and the FBI followed the paper trail, and what began as a quiet probe into unusual claims quickly ballooned into a full-blown federal case. In 2021, McCune pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and healthcare fraud. Then, in February 2022, he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Prosecutors described the scheme as calculated and brazen, emphasizing McCune's role in submitting false documents, impersonating others, and recruiting additional participants into the conspiracy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be posting more interesting videos on the channel. Justin Bannon. Justin Bannon was once known for his relentless power on the defensive line. A 6 feet 3 inches, 300-pound NFL veteran, Bannon played 13 seasons in the league with teams like the Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, Denver Broncos, and Detroit Lions. Drafted in 2002 out of the University of Colorado, he racked up over 300 tackles and was respected across the league for his intelligence and discipline on the field. For over a decade, he was the model of durability and professionalism. But in 2019, years after his NFL career had faded into the rearview mirror, Bannon's name resurfaced. Not on a roster, but in a courtroom. On an October afternoon in Boulder, Colorado, a chilling 911 call would mark the beginning of a bizarre and violent unraveling. Bannon had entered the waiting room of an acupuncture clinic he often visited and shot a woman, an acupuncturist who was simply doing her job. She was struck in the shoulder. Miraculously, she survived. When police arrived, they found Bannon in possession of a loaded .380 handgun, multiple magazines, and a strange, fragmented explanation. He believed, he said, that he was being pursued by the Russian mafia. He claimed the attack wasn't premeditated, that it was paranoia, that he thought he was being followed and acted out of fear. Investigators weren't convinced. The evidence didn't point to delusion alone. It pointed to intention. A rolled-up dollar bill with traces of cocaine was found in Bannon's possession, and his past struggles with traumatic brain injury and substance use were brought into sharp focus during the proceedings. Still, prosecutors argued firmly that mental illness could not excuse violence against an innocent person. In September 2021, a jury convicted him of attempted first-degree murder, first-degree assault with a deadly weapon, and burglary. The following year, he was sentenced to 16 years in state prison. A once-celebrated athlete now sits behind bars. Daryl Henley. Daryl Henley was once a rising star on the gridiron, a cornerback for the Los Angeles Rams in the early 1990s, drafted in the second round out of UCLA. Known for his quick feet and sharp instincts, he was seen as a cornerstone of the Rams' secondary. Henley wasn't just athletic. He was charismatic, media-friendly, and appeared to have a future well beyond football. Then, in a matter of years, everything collapsed. In 1995, federal agents arrested Henley in connection with a drug trafficking ring that stretched from California to Texas. Prosecutors alleged that Henley helped finance and coordinate cocaine shipments, using his NFL income and connections to fuel the operation. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. But the story didn't end there. In fact, it took a darker, more dangerous turn that stunned even seasoned investigators. While incarcerated and awaiting appeal, Henley attempted to orchestrate the murders of a federal judge and a key witness in his drug case. From inside his cell, he made contact with a woman who served as a go-between to contract two hitmen. The plan was chilling in scope and deeply reckless. What Henley didn't know was that the supposed killers were actually undercover FBI agents. The sting operation produced detailed recordings and transcripts of Henley's intent, leaving absolutely no room for doubt. In 1996, the court added 21 more years to Henley's original sentence, bringing his total to 41 years behind bars. As of today, Daryl Henley remains in federal prison. His legacy, not one of Super Bowl rings or game-winning interceptions, but of a life that spiraled from the spotlight into the shadows of a maximum security cell. Darren Sharper. Darren Sharper was once a household name in the NFL. A hard-hitting safety known for his instincts, athleticism, and sideline-to-sideline range. He played 14 seasons between 1997 and 2010 with the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, and New Orleans Saints. A five-time Pro Bowler, two-time All-Pro, and Super Bowl 44 champion, Sharper retired with 63 career interceptions, one of the highest totals in league history. He was celebrated. He was admired. And behind all of it, he was hiding something monstrous. Beginning around 2010, Sharper's post-NFL life spiraled into a dark and systematic pattern of predatory behavior. Over several years, he traveled across multiple states, including California, Arizona, Nevada, and Louisiana, where he lured women under the guise of partying and social gatherings. In reality, he drugged them using a combination of sleep-inducing substances like zolpidem and temazepam, then sexually assaulted them while they were incapacitated. The pattern was chillingly calculated. Victims often awoke with no memory of what had happened, only to learn the horrifying truth later. Some never reported it. Some did not even know who had done it to them. As allegations mounted, a multi-state investigation began to unfold. In 2014, Sharper was arrested and eventually faced charges in 4 different states, triggering a complex legal battle spanning jurisdictions. Federal prosecutors described him as a serial predator who weaponized his fame, his charm, and pharmaceutical drugs to access and assault vulnerable women. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to multiple counts of rape and drugging, both at the federal level and in several state courts. Despite a proposed 9-year plea deal that drew sharp public criticism, the judge rejected it as far too lenient and ultimately sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. Additional state-level sentences were allowed to run concurrently. Sharper is currently serving his time at FCI Miami, with a projected release date in late 2028. Fame did not protect his victims, but in the end, it could not protect him either. Frankie Neal. His journey began in the bright lights of the NFL stage, but it ended behind the cold bars of a Florida prison. Born in 1965, Frankie Neal was a standout wide receiver at the University of Florida before being drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 1987. His NFL career was brief, just 1 season, but filled with the kind of promise that made scouts and coaches believe he had a long professional run ahead of him. Instead, Neal disappeared from a league and re-emerged decades later, not in headlines for touchdowns, but for trafficking kilos of cocaine through Florida's drug corridors. What happened in between those years is a grim tale of wasted potential and irreversible choices. Neal didn't just dabble in drugs. He orchestrated major narcotics operations, acting as a central figure in a multi-state cocaine distribution ring. According to prosecutors, he leveraged old connections and street-level influence to move large quantities of drugs from South Florida into central and northern markets. His operation ran like a business, efficient, calculated, and deeply rooted. But like most drug empires built on a foundation of criminality, it didn't last. In a sweeping federal investigation that involved wiretaps, confidential informants, and months of painstaking surveillance, agents finally brought Neal's empire down. The evidence was overwhelming. Cash, drugs, ledgers, and coded communications that pointed directly to his leadership role. In 2017, Neal was convicted on multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to distribute cocaine and possession with intent to distribute. The judge handed him a 30-year sentence, emphasizing not just the scale of the crimes, but Neal's unwillingness to walk away from the world he had chosen, long after the NFL spotlight had faded to black. Now, Frankie Neal serves his time in a Florida federal prison. Justin Crawford. Justin Crawford, born February 19, 1995 in Columbus, Georgia, was a standout running back at Hardaway High School before transferring from Northwest Mississippi Community College to West Virginia University. In 2016 and 2017, he rushed for over 1,000 yards each season and earned second-team All-Big 12 honors, as well as Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year in 2016. Undrafted in 2018, he briefly signed with the Atlanta Falcons and later joined the Atlanta Legends of the Alliance of American Football. His professional career was cut short before it ever fully began, but the reason it ended had nothing to do with injury or performance. In October 2018, Crawford was arrested at his Columbus, Georgia home after a 12-year-old family member accused him of sexual abuse. Reports indicate his wife discovered him unclothed and standing over the child in their house, prompting her to immediately alert the child's mother. Initially, Crawford denied any wrongdoing. Later, in a statement that chilled investigators and prosecutors alike, he claimed the child had initiated contact. Police filed charges of aggravated child molestation, sodomy, incest, and enticing a child for indecent purposes. During the subsequent legal proceedings, investigators testified that the girl stated she was sleeping on a couch when Crawford approached and forced her into sexual acts. His defense counsel offered minimal public comment. Prosecutors moved forward on the most serious felony charges available to them. In September 2019, Crawford pleaded guilty to child molestation and sodomy as part of a plea arrangement that dropped the additional counts. A Muskogee County court sentenced him to 12 years in prison, to be followed by 8 years of probation. He must register as a sex offender for life and is barred from any contact with minors, including his own children. Keith Wright. Keith Wright once stood on the cusp of NFL potential. Born in 1980, the defensive tackle played college football at the University of Missouri, earning all Big 12 honors in 2002 before being drafted by the Houston Texans in the 6th round of the 2003 NFL Draft. Though his time in the league was brief, with stints at teams including the Indianapolis Colts and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Wright showed flashes of ability in the trenches. And then football ended, and the real Keith Wright emerged. Between 2011 and 2012, Wright committed a series of violent crimes that left a trail of trauma across Northern California. Prosecutors said Wright posed as a real estate agent to gain access to homes under the guise of rental agreements. Once inside, he tied up, blindfolded, and sexually assaulted multiple women. In several incidents, he used a stun gun and threatened his victims at gunpoint. He also burglarized the homes, stealing electronics, jewelry, and in at least one case, a victim's car. The pattern was methodical. It was predatory, and it went on for over a year. The investigation intensified as victims came forward with eerily similar accounts. DNA evidence proved critical, linking Wright to at least 6 home invasion robberies and 3 rapes. When Wright was arrested in Sacramento in August 2011, he was already on probation for unrelated theft charges. The evidence against him was overwhelming. In September 2012, a California jury found Keith Wright guilty on 19 felony counts, including rape, armed robbery, and forced oral copulation. He was sentenced to 234 years in state prison, effectively a life sentence. Justice did not forget the women he targeted. Brandon Browner. Brandon Browner is a man who once stood tall as a dominant force on the football field. Born in 1984, he carved out a reputation as a hard-hitting cornerback, playing in both the CFL and the NFL. Browner was a key member of the famed Legion of Boom with the Seattle Seahawks and won a Super Bowl ring in Super Bowl 48 in 2013. He earned his second ring the following year with the New England Patriots, making him one of the rare players to win back-to-back championships with 2 different teams. By any measure of football achievement, Browner had reached the summit, and then he threw it all away. In 2018, Browner's name reappeared in headlines, not for his on-field heroics, but for a terrifying incident in Laverne, California, where he broke into his ex-girlfriend's home. According to prosecutors, Browner physically assaulted her, dragged her, and threatened to kill her in front of her children. He also stole a Rolex watch during the encounter. The details painted a grim picture of violence, control, and the complete unraveling of a man who once wore 2 championship rings. The investigation moved swiftly. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts supported the victim's claims without ambiguity. In December 2018, Browner pleaded no contest to attempted murder and 2 misdemeanor counts of cruelty to a child. The plea stunned the sports world. Once a celebrated NFL champion, Browner was sentenced to 8 years in California State Prison and placed under a 10-year protective order to shield the victim and her children. Reports suggest he was released in March of 2024. The 2 rings remain. The legacy they represented does not. Robert Roier. Robert Roier, the man who once stood at the edge of football greatness. Born in 1955, he was a towering defensive end with raw talent and a second-round NFL draft pick by the St. Louis Cardinals in 1979. Though his professional career was brief, just 6 games, Roier had the physical gifts that many athletes spend a lifetime chasing. After his short-lived NFL stint and a turn in the Canadian Football League, his life took a sharp and deeply disturbing detour, one that would spiral through violence, fanaticism, and death. By the early 1980s, Roier had joined a religious cult known as the Nation of Yahweh, led by the self-proclaimed Messiah Yahweh ben Yahweh in Miami. What began as a spiritual journey morphed into something far darker. Roier became an enforcer for the group, eventually confessing to 7 murders carried out in the name of the cult. The killings, brutal and ritualistic, were intended to prove loyalty to the group's leader. In one case, Roier severed a victim's ear as part of a loyalty rite, a chilling and gruesome symbol of obedience to a cause that had been twisted far beyond recognition. Authorities began closing in by the mid-1980s. Roier was arrested in 1986 and ultimately cooperated with federal prosecutors, becoming a key witness in a sweeping racketeering case against Yahweh ben Yahweh and his followers. His cooperation helped convict the cult leader, but Roier's own sentence reflected the full gravity of his actions. He received a 22-year sentence for his role in the killings, serving roughly a decade before being released under a new identity in witness protection. But freedom didn't last. Under the name Robert Ramsey, he was arrested again in the early 2000s for check fraud. And under California's three strikes law, his past came crashing back with devastating force. In 2001, Roier was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, a final chapter written not in comeback stories, but in consequence. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot more videos here. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. And remember, these stories deserve to be told. Thank you very much.